Edmonton Police Commission. I, on behalf of Council, time on City Council as a City Councillor, now as Mayor. I don't think we have ever met in this kind of format before as Council and Commission to talk about our shared values and shared goal of building a stronger city, a safe city for all of us. So this is a start of a new journey in having these conversations, and I'm looking forward to that engagement. And so I want to thank you, each and every one of you, on behalf of Council, for being here today and for making time and for your willingness to have this conversation in a public forum. And with that, I will pass on the chair over to our Commission Chair, John McDougall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking City. There we are. Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, and the public for this opportunity to speak. The Council looks forward to opportunities to build relationships, work collaboratively to ensure that we have a safe and healthy city. I'd like to start by introducing who we have with us in person today. We have Commissioner Kemi Boachi-Kufor in the corner. We have Commissioner Jody Callahoo-Stonehouse. We have Councillor Commissioner Sarah Hamilton. We have Councillor Commissioner Ann Stevenson. We have Commissioner Irfan Chaudhry, Commissioner Shazia Amini, and we have Commissioner Ashwin Singh. We also have our Executive Director, Matt Barker, behind me as well, as Bonnie Rydell is our policy analyst. She's with us as well this morning. So if we could start with our first slide, please. Next slide, please. So here are the current members of the Edmonton Police Commission. All these members have been appointed by City Council after a comprehensive talent search. As I said earlier, we all share a common goal for a change in a positive way. As guardians of the public trust, the Edmonton Police Commission represents the citizens of Edmonton. We constantly strive toward outcome-based results that improve community safety, well-being, and inclusivity. We are also one of the most diverse commissions Edmonton has ever seen. We consist of 6 women, 4 men, 6 members from the BIPOC community, and 2 members from the LGBTQ2S+ community. We are all accomplished and respected professionals in our field, and we act as a non-political and independent governance body of the police service. The Commission members' depth, breadth, lived experience, education, awareness of community matters, desire for constructive conversation, and a passion for driving change in policing should not be discounted. Next slide, please. So what about the Commission's authority? We're a governing body for the police service, and we ensure that there is a clear and legally required separation between police governance and elected officials with respect to oversight and the operation of police services. Our authority comes from several sources. We get it from the Police Act, we get it from the Provincial Policing Standards for Commissions, and we get it from city bylaws. We perform both governance and oversight roles. This is accomplished through setting of policy and monitoring the police service, which includes budget, public complaints, service and performance levels. We'll go into greater detail on those subjects later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The Commission meets 39 times a year on regular scheduled meetings. We also meet many other times for specific issues. Our meetings allow us the opportunity to exercise the responsibility to the City of Edmonton for providing an effective civilian oversight for policing. This includes community engagements, funding, establishing policies, directing the Chief of Police, ensuring effective services, and monitoring police complaints and serious incidents. The Commission takes its role of governance very seriously. We have a statutory responsibility under the Police Act to provide adequate and effective policing. After we hire a chief, we set out annual and long-term goals for the chief, and we're responsible for tracking the progress on those goals annually. We have to be aligned in our thinking and our vision for the future. The chief is our employee, and he is responsible for actioning and implementing the Commission's mandate. The chief holds a powerful position in implementing change in culture, in programming, and showing the way for how police service interacts with the people it serves, our fellow citizens. This has most recently been evidenced through the hiring of Chief McPhee and his organizational review and restructuring of the existing EPS resources. This work is aimed to better manage service demands by balancing traditional enforcement with additional social supports. This positions EPS as a modern police service that puts community well-being and safety at the forefront while becoming smarter and more efficient at reducing crime. The Commission has a strong governance role with respect to the serious issues involving police officers, and we exercise it in the following ways. Through the Professional Standards Committee, which reviews all complaints against police officers, including those alleging of improper use of force. The Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ASIRT, investigations. The Commission is advised of all files that have been referred to ASIRT for investigation, along with the outcome of those investigations. Reporting of the use of force by police officers is provided to the Commission twice a year through the EPS Control Tactics Statistics Report. These reports provide data and year-over-year trends on what use of force is used by the police officers, along with a summary of how many use of force incidents result in a complaint of improper use of force. These reports are public, they're posted online. Immediate updates and confidential discussions with the chief and his team on serious issues. Next slide, please. Under the Police Act, any city, town, village, or summer village that has a population greater than 5,000 shall do one of the following: enter into an agreement for the provision of municipal policing service, establish a regional police service, or establish a municipal police service. An established municipal police service falls under the general supervision of a municipal police commission. As council, you appoint commissioners in accordance with the Police Act and set standards for the Commission as set out by the Government of Alberta. Additionally, when developing a budget, councils may obtain any information from the Commission they feel may be necessary to assess the efficiency and the financing requirement of the police service. As with other municipalities with a municipal police service, Edmonton City Council is responsible for establishing the total budget for the purposes of the police service, and the Edmonton Police Commission is responsible for allocating those funds provided under the budget. It should also be noted that municipality exercises collective bargaining functions for the employees of the police service, with the exception of the chief and the deputy chiefs. Next slide, please. The role of the chief. Our chief has the following roles and responsibilities as set out in the Police Act: the prevention and maintenance of public peace and the prevention of crime within the municipality, the maintenance of discipline and the performance of duty within the police service, subject to the regulations governing the discipline and performance and duty police officers, the day-to-day administration of the police service, and the application of police procedures, the enforcement of policies made by the Commission with respect to the police service. As well, the chief is accountable to the Police Commission for the following items: the operation of the police service, the manner in which the chief of police carries out the responsibilities established by the Commission, the administration of the finance and operations of the service in keeping with the yearly plan and any amendments made to that by the Commission, The reporting to the Commission of any information concerning activities of the police service that the Commission may request, other than information concerning individual investigations or intelligence files. The reporting to the Commission of any complaint made against the service or its members, the progress of any investigation or any informal resolution process regarding the complaint, and the reasons for any delays in the manner in which that complaint is resolved. Next slide, please. Provincial rule. The Government of Alberta has the overall responsibility for policing in Alberta through the Police Act. They are responsible for ensuring that an adequate and effective police service is maintained throughout Alberta. They do this through a number of ways, including establishing ASIRT for the investigation of serious incidents, setting out police standards that police services must show they adhere to through yearly audits, setting the standards for police commissions, updating the acts and regulations over time, establishment of alert and ensuring multiple police service participation, as well as providing grants to police services through the Municipal Police Assistance Grant and Police Officer Grant programs. It's now my privilege to turn the presentation over to Commissioner Callahoo Stonehouse.
Thank you. Beautiful. The province sets standards for both commission and services to follow with respect to how they deliver services. These standards are comprehensive and they help ensure commission and services deliver on their core statutory responsibility, namely governance and oversight for commissions and crime, disorder, and community policing for police services. Commission standards require a broad range of activities and policies to be in place, such as recruitment standards for commissioners, training expectations, how a public complaints director must function, financial records, and governance standards. Police standards set out hundreds of individual standards for services to follow, such as requirements for community policing, management of human relations matters, operational policing standards, requirement for support services such as victim services, tactical units, and forensic services. The police service successfully passed a provincial audit in 2020 and expects to be audited again in 2024 based on a 4-year cycle. The province has temporarily ceased auditing commissions, but the Edmonton Police Commission directed our auditor to conduct a self-audit in 2018. This resulted in a few minor recommendations, primarily on administrative matters that were implemented quickly. These standards applicable to all commissions and services in Alberta are an important part of ensuring high level of policing is delivered by the police services to all Edmontonians. Next slide, please. The Act has been updated in the past decade in certain discrete areas to address public interest issues and concerns. However, the Act has not undergone comprehensive modernization to address elements that are dated and no longer meet today's needs for policing oversight and services in Alberta. The big change all commissions, committees, police services, and police associations have been asking for is the establishment of an independent external agency to manage all complaints regarding officer conduct. The Government of Alberta has been open to this request, and we hope it will be addressing this year in legislation. We believe that the current system of police oversight no longer meets the needs of the citizens or the police officers. Over several years, we have advocated to successive provincial governments for change in this space, for a model that would move the responsibility for investigating police from the police service to an independent agency. This is a model we prefer and believe it will enhance public confidence in how our complaints are managed. However, the Commission continues to believe a comprehensive review process addressing all aspects of the Act and regulations is required to enhance and improve oversight and to facilitate the efficient operations of police services. We have flagged on a number of occasions to the provincial government that we still have concerns in other areas considered critical by the Commission and will not be addressed in a timely manner. Without overshadowing the need of a comprehensive modernization, we have set out the slide above and the top changes requested by the Commission. Number 1 is expected to occur this year. Number 2 is critical to proceed down the path of modernization related to current community and police officer standards and expectations. This includes consideration for a mandated provincial police training curriculum and requirements for learning models through which skills are delivered to police recruits. Modernization of recruitment standards for police officers within the Act, as well as the provincial policing standards, are needed on topics to education, physical standards, medical standards, and more, in order to broaden the type of individuals who want to make policing a career. Some small examples are at a high level of physical fitness required on entry, but not after hire, or a minimum of grade 12 education only. We also recommend the consideration of provisions allowing for chiefs of police to appoint special constables employed by the police service to permit the direct entry of skilled individuals to investigate roles within a police service. This can allow for a range of tiered policing services to be delivered, all under the umbrella of the Police Act, providing enhanced accountability and public oversight. While the Edmonton Police Service and others have already started down this path, we feel the provincial legislation should formalize a provision for community-based policing initiatives that would help Alberta chart a path from centralized police services that practice reactive policing to more decentralized police structures that emphasize a proactive, problem-solving approach where police work in close partnership with the communities they serve. Next slide, please. Under the Police Act, the Commission is responsible for providing effective civilian oversight of policing. As part of this oversight role, the Commission monitors, reviews public complaints and serious incidents in a variety of ways as described below. There are 3 key parties responsible for overseeing the public complaint process. They are the Public Complaint Director, members of the Commission Professional Standards Committee, and the Edmonton Police Commission as a whole. The Police Act directs police commissions to designate a Public Complaint Director. The Commission employs a full-time Public Complaint Director who is responsible for assisting EPC with the day-to-day administration, monitoring, and oversight of the public complaints. Public complaint oversight is also exercised by members of the Commission's Professional Standards Committee. The mandate of this committee is to monitor and oversee the public complaint process and to ensure investigations are thorough and fair to all parties, including the complainant and the officer against whom a complaint has been made. Next slide, please. The Commission further exercises oversight of the public complaint process and outcomes by receiving regular reporting from EPS on the topics listed below. Commissioners may request EPS on matters contained in these reports or request information on any public complaint matter during the monthly Commission meetings or as otherwise required through the Chair of the Commission. The following reports are made to EPC and provided publicly in meeting materials and on our website. Professional Standards Branch quarterly reports, Professional Standards Branch annual reports. The following reports are internal documents provided to EPC as indicated. Weekly 45-day letter reports indicating stage of complaint files. Monthly relieved from duty reports, providing background and status on investigations or criminal proceedings for police officers who have been relieved from duty. Bi-monthly extension requests, providing background, investigation steps taken, and tasks remaining to on complaint files, which require time extensions to continue investigations beyond the 6-month timeline set out by the Section 7 of the Police Service Regulation. Commissioners also receive relevant information regarding complaints and police disciplinary matters through serious incident notifications made pursuant to Section 46.1 of the Police Act, concluding letters on investigations conducted by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, ASIRT, disciplinary hearing decisions, and Law Enforcement Review Board decisions. Next slide, please. Under the Police Act, the Police Service Regulation, the Commission is also responsible for making numerous decisions which relate to the complaint process and allegations of misconduct by police officers, including the Chief of Police. This statutory decision-making authority provides an additional layer of oversight to the complaint and disciplinary process of EPS. As I previously mentioned, there is a 6-month time limit under the Police Service Regulation in which an officer may be charged with misconduct. If an investigation takes longer than 6 months, an extension request must be sought from the Commission. The Commission reviews the information provided by EPS for each file requiring an extension. And I sit on this committee, and I can tell you we review each file. An extension will often be granted if the complaint has participated in the process and progress is being made in the investigation, but not always. The Commission considers the specific circumstances of each individual's extension request before making a decision. If the Commission refuses to grant an extension request in a particular matter, the complaint is concluded without the investigation being completed, and there is no longer any jurisdiction to charge the officer with misconduct. Another type of decision the Commission must make relates to complaints that are potentially frivolous, vexatious, and made in bad faith. If the Chief believes a complaint fits within one of these categories, it will be referred to the Commission. The Commission reviews the information provided by the Chief and decides whether the complaint should be dismissed on that basis or whether the Chief should be directed to continue the investigation into the complaint. When the Chief of Police has reasonable grounds to suspect that a police officer has committed misconduct and is the opinion that exceptional circumstances exist regarding the alleged misconduct, that officer may be relieved from duty without pay. The Commission is responsible for reviewing the Chief's decisions and deciding within 30 days whether or not to confirm the decision to relieve the officer from duty without pay. The Commission is also responsible for hearing appeals from the disposition of public complaints regarding the policies of or services provided by the Edmonton Police Service. If the complainant is not satisfied with the outcome of their policy or service complaint, they have the statutory right to appeal that outcome to the Commission. The complainant and the Chief of Police are both given the opportunity to provide appeal submissions to the Commission, and then the Commission decides whether to uphold the Chief's disposition of the policy or service complaint or whether some action is appropriate. Finally, the Commission is responsible for dealing with complaints against the Chief of Police. Under the Police Act, these are only complaints that are not referred to the Chief, as that would obviously be a conflict of interest. Instead, Commission reviews the complaint to determine whether it meets the requirement of the Act, whether it may be frivolous, vexatious, or made in bad faith, or whether it meets the screening threshold set out in the Act. If satisfied that the complaint passes the screening threshold, the Commission must ask the Minister of Justice to direct another police service to investigate the complaint. Once completed, the investigation file is returned to the Commission, which will then either conduct a disciplinary hearing, dispose of the matter without conducting a hearing, or dismiss the complaint, depending on the result of the investigation. Next slide, please. As I noted earlier, the Police Act requires every police commission in Alberta to appoint a public complaint director who is responsible for assisting the commission in the day-to-day management of its complaint oversight role. The Act also assigns a number of specific duties to the PCD. Part of the PCD role is to receive complaints, refer them to the chief of police unless it's actually a complaint against the chief, in which case it would remain with the commission to be dealt with. Each time our office receives a complaint, the PCD reviews it, corresponds with the complaint regarding any missing details, not mission, my apologies, and provides them with the information about the complaint process. The complaint is then forwarded to the Professional Standards branch of EPS, which is where the chief has delegated his authority to deal with the complaints. The PCD may also act as a liaison between the commission, the chief of police, or the Professional Standards branch, and the complainant is required, as the complainant as required. This occurs occasionally with complainants who are not comfortable dealing directly with the police service in relation to their complaint, and they prefer to communicate through the PCD, which may be perceived as more neutral. As well, the PCD is a main point of contact between the Commission and the Professional Standards branch for their ongoing communication and reports. If the EPC has questions or concerns about the EPS complaint process, generally the status or handling of a particular complaint, they may be assigned the PCD to review the matter or request further information from the Professional Standards branch. Another part of the PCD's role is to review the investigation conducted into a complaint, both during the course of the investigation and at its conclusion. That occurs in a variety of ways. The PCD can electronically access the Professional Standards branch files at any time for random audits or to review the status of a complaint on the PCD's watch list. The PCD receives ongoing reporting of complaint files through bi-weekly meetings at the Professional Standards branch, along with the 45-day letters that are sent to all complainants regarding the status of their complaint. And the PCD reviews every disposition letter when a complaint has been concluded. Complainants will also regularly contact the PCD with questions or concerns about their complaint, and audits of complaint files routinely occur in response to those contacts. The PCD is also authorized to offer an alternative dispute resolution process, an ADR, if that is deemed to be appropriate. The possibility is usually raised with complaints unless it's very obvious that an ADR would not be appropriate for their matter. Many complaints will at least consider ADR, even if they don't ultimately agree to attempt resolving their complaint in that matter. ADR is a completely voluntary process, which means that everyone, including both complainants and involved police officers, have to agree to participate in order for it to proceed. When the ADR process has been used with respect to a particular complaint, the PCD also receives reporting on an outcome of the ADR process and whether it was successful in resolving the complaint. Finally, the PCD provides regularly reports to the Professional Standards branch, and its bi-monthly meetings along with the reports to the EPC as a whole as required. These reports will include information such as types of complaints the Commission has been receiving, any trends in complaints, issues with particular complaint files, updates on previous inquiries made by the Commission, and whatever else the EPC requires to assist in managing its complaint oversight role. Next slide, please. If a citizen of Edmonton has filed a complaint on the conduct of an officer, they will receive a disposition letter from the Chief of Police if the complaint was investigated. Citizens have the right to appeal this decision directly to the Law Enforcement Review Board, or LERB, if they are not satisfied with the outcome of their complaint. The LERB is a statutory quasi-judicial appeal tribunal based in Edmonton, but it is active throughout Alberta and it covers both municipal and First Nations police services. It is an independent and impartial body established under the Police Act. Their board is made up of individuals from diverse backgrounds who also have a broad range of experience in the community and are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. They represent the citizens of Alberta to ensure that the public trust in their police service is warranted and providing civilian oversight of police disciplinary matters. The board's mandate aligns with the priorities and initiatives, of the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, including supported, resilient, and safe communities, client-focused services, a fair and accessible justice system, effective and appropriate oversight and accountability mechanisms. Their vision is to ensure that their board are conducted fairly, efficiently, and transparently in accordance with the principles of natural justice, with high-quality decisions being rendered in a timely manner. The LERB's main role is that to review a body that it can review decisions of the chiefs of police and the decisions of the police commissions, such as complaints about the chief and certain complaint dismissals. They hear from members of the public who are not satisfied with the disposition of their complaint. For example, a chief can dismiss a complaint without a disciplinary hearing, and the LERB could overturn that decision and send it back to the chief for reconsideration, or they can send it to a disciplinary hearing. The LERB reviews decisions by taking in all the evidence, such as the records the chief had in making his determination at the time. But it should be noted that the board does not make their own findings on fact. They don't directly decide officer guilt or innocence. They have to be differential and can only intervene if the chief's decision fell outside the range of reasonable or acceptable based on the facts that was placed before the chief's decision. The Law Enforcement Review Board publishes the reasons for all its appeal decisions after the reasons are provided in writing to both the affected citizen, affected officer, and police service. They have also been actively participating and contributing to the review of the Police Act to highlight areas of improvement in the area of the disciplinary process and have made recommendations and solutions which may lead to overall improved policing and police oversight in Alberta. Next slide, please. A fatality inquiry is a legal proceeding before a provincial court judge that helps clarify the circumstances of a death. They can also provide insight and recommendations to prevent similar deaths. Before an inquiry is done, the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General orders an inquiry. It can be ordered with or without a recommendation from the Fatality Review Board. Before an inquiry commences, all investigations and criminal charges, including appeals, must be completed. It should be noted that in June 2017, the Alberta government started a public tracking system for responses to the judge's recommendations in all fatality inquiries. The Fatality Review Board reviews deaths when the cause or manner of death has not been established when a person dies in a correctional facility, institution, or jail, in the custody of a peace officer, or from use of force by an on-duty peace officer. The public can also request a fatality inquiry by contacting the board. The board is advisory in nature and makes recommendations to the minister regarding which death investigated by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner are of sufficient public interest to proceed to a public fatality inquiry. The ministry is wholly responsible for the legislation, regulation, and policy frameworks under which the board operates. All fatality inquiries are held before a provincial court judge, and each inquiry is open to the public unless the judge has ordered it to be held private. After an inquiry is complete, the judge releases a report to the public and to the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General, and it may make recommendations on how to prevent similar deaths in the future. After a judge makes a recommendation to the Alberta government, the government issues a response to the recommendation. As stated before, the government started a public tracking system for responses to recommendations. This tracking helps to improve accountability, provide transparency, and hopefully prevent similar deaths from happening. Last slide, please. In closing, I would like to say that we are proud of the changes implemented by the service so far with our support. Investments in social programming and partnerships have meaningfully changed how the police service delivers to Edmontonians, though we recognize more work needs to happen in this space. The Commission has approved of the service, making significant budget investments in doing things differently, more compassionately, with a close eye on measurements and human-centered outcomes. We have seen primarily results in Edmonton, not only with decreasing crime rates exceeding decreases seen in other parts of Alberta, but also in how police culture is becoming more focused on community safety, well-being, and inclusivity. The Commission recognizes crime rates and calls for service to the police can be improved by ongoing investments in social services, mental health services, education, and health. As guardians of the public trust, the Commission represents the citizens of Edmonton and will continue to work with the Edmonton Police Service to support racialized and marginalized communities and affirm our commitment to constructive change. The Commission deeply believes in increasing the focus on social interventions for health, mental health, housing, addictions treatment, and poverty, while continuing to prioritize community safety, will reduce the demand for police services by moving people away from interactions with the justice system. I just also want to leave you with a few thoughts. Our community is changing, and so is police services. The transformation of policing is not going to happen overnight, and we are dedicated and a committed group of citizens holding account our service, our chief. We are diverse, we are inclusive, and we are all committed to doing the best possible job for Edmontonians. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about the Edmonton Police Commission, and I'm open, along with my colleagues, to any questions you might have. Thank you.
We also have
Are you on, Michael?
Yes, I am. Was I called?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, probably the microphone didn't work. Yes, you're next.
Oh, thank you very much, sir.
If you could introduce yourself as well, start.
Yes, of course. ASIRT itself.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Ewenson. We are unable to hear you on the live stream, so we'll just have you pause, and we will try to resolve these technical issues, and we'll let you know when to resume.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies, we have tech on the issue right now.
So we will be in recess until the issue is resolved.
Thank you, Chair. Michael, could you please come back on mic and video?
Hello?
Thank you. I think we are ready to go, Mr. Mayor.
So they're going to listen.
All right, everyone, I would like to bring this meeting back to order. Sorry about the technical difficulties. It's our first meeting in the Heritage Room here after 2 years, but everything is being recorded. If you're having technical difficulties hearing now, this meeting from the start has been being recorded on YouTube, and it will be available if you are unable to hear it now. But I hope now technical difficulties are dealt with. You'll be able to hear us, and we will go back to our guest from ASIRT, Michael Evanson. Before I do that, I also want to welcome Commission Chair Hussein Ali to our meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. As I was mentioning, and I'll just backtrack a little bit because I understand that parts of the presentation weren't audible, but we were set up under provincial authority, and we have authority to investigate the actions of all police officers within the province of Alberta. The creation was, as I mentioned, collaborative in that there was a recognized need, and it was created in conjunction with a consultation with the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police. It's very important to stress that it is a civilian-led organization and independent of all police forces within Alberta. This is something that often comes up in meetings with the families of affected persons, which is a terminology we use for people who have been subjected to a police force. And we stress to them that as a civilian, I have never been a police officer and entirely independent of any police force. Our role is to enhance public confidence in policing and also to ensure the accountability in the investigation of serious or sensitive incidences involving Alberta's police officers. And that's really where our mandate comes in, is that the incidences must be serious or sensitive. As mentioned, we have two offices that both employ investigators in Calgary and in Edmonton, and these investigators can be seconded from the Calgary Police Service, the Edmonton Police Service, or the RCMP. And we also have individuals who are Government of Alberta employees who have a background in policing, although not necessarily a background in policing in Alberta. We have a recent hire from the United Kingdom, for example. In terms of the amount of officers we cover, there's over 6,000 in Alberta, and we have a memorandum of understanding with the Yukon to offer service to them. We are focused on criminal code investigations. So we're investigating the possibility of crimes that have been committed by officers. We are not involved with code of conduct allegations. The investigators with ASIRT employ a major case investigative techniques. Simply put, these are very thorough investigations. We know there's a prevalence of cell phones in the communities, security cameras. The Calgary Police Service has body-worn cameras, and oftentimes an incident is covered very well by footage, but nonetheless, the investigators are mandated to collect all evidence. We believe that strongly and positively impacts the public's view of and the confidence they have in our investigations. Our investigators are fact finders, and that's important to note because when we see police officers with RCMP, EPS, or CPS on the street, if they see a crime being committed, they can come to an opinion on the spot and effect an arrest. But ASIRT is different. These investigators are purely fact finders. They cannot come to an opinion. They will not charge an officer. And they obtain all of the available facts regarding an incident. And then that comes to me in terms of civilian oversight. And that's my role as a civilian, not an officer, is to determine whether or not it's reasonable to believe that a crime has been committed. ASIRT becomes involved in an event under a notification we call a 46.1 notification under the Police Act. The Police Act requires a chief of police or their designate to notify the director of law enforcement of any incident involving a police officer in Alberta that results in the death or serious injury to any person or an allegation of serious or sensitive police misconduct. A 46.1 notification does not automatically mean that ASIRT takes on the investigation. The director of law enforcement may have the home agency conduct it in appropriate circumstances. They may have the home agency conduct the investigation with an overseer from ASIRT embedded in the investigation. They may have an outside agency conduct the investigation in appropriate circumstances, or they may fully use ASIRT to conduct the investigation. We do not take complaints from the public. So we are directed by the Director of Law Enforcement within the Alberta government as to when to embark upon a complaint or an investigation, I should say. If we do receive a complaint from the public, we will of course assist them by advising them of the appropriate procedure, but the public cannot initiate a complaint with ASIRT. It's the Director of Law Enforcement that directs us to investigate. In terms of serious injury, that it's a fairly flexible determination, but anything that can land an individual in the hospital, certainly ASIRT will be called and may investigate. In terms of sensitive cases, to provide some context to that term, an event that may bring the police into disrepute, such as corruption or perjury, would fall within the mandate of ASIRT to look into. As part of the investigative process with ASIRT, we make a determination as to who is a subject officer. That would be the individual subject to the investigation, and who, of course, is a witness officer. A witness officer will assist in the investigation, whereas ASIRT cannot compel a subject officer to provide a statement. They have certain, quite properly, protections in the investigation. When ASIRT attends a scene, our investigators take over the evidence collection. We have memorandums of understanding with the various police forces. A scene will be secured by the local police force, and then ASIRT will then conduct and monitor that investigation. All evidence that is collected by an investigator is then placed in a report that's given to myself. And as indicated, it does not provide a conclusion. So even if it is a retired officer or someone who has no ties to Alberta policing, they won't come to a conclusion. They're simply fact finders. And then myself, in conjunction with the legal counsel we have, who are civilians, will come to a determination. I should address the issue of resourcing, because that has been something that has attracted significant attention in the past with ASIRT. In the recent budget, ASIRT received a $1.4 million increase to our operating budget. That number, of course, is somewhat meaningless without context, and they always advise lawyers to not do math. But I will tell you that it's approximately 36% increase from our previous fixed budget. That's a budget we had had in place for a number of years. What I've directed that money to go to is to hire 5 more investigators. 3 will be based in Edmonton, 2 will be based in Calgary, and that's simply based on need. And that shouldn't be taken that it's needs specifically relating to EPS or CPS investigations, as these 2 offices cover the entirety of the province. It's also being hired to, used to hire admin staff to allow for more efficient passing of files, as previous presenter talked about the Fatality Act inquiries. And so our files do go to other agencies and other processes, and so that will speed up that aspect of it. We have already increased our legal counsel numbers, with myself being supported by an assistant executive director, as well as a third legal counsel. And why that matters is because after the investigators complete the reports, they must hand them off to the civilian oversight aspect of ASIRT. And we then have to go through that report and come to a legal conclusion as to which stream the investigation should head, whether we clear an officer or whether the officer ends up charged. And that's solely on the shoulders of myself and the other two legal counsel. The budget increase was needed. My predecessor was very vocal, quite properly so, and I thank her for that, in terms of singing the praises of ASIRT and indicating that we need an increase in budget, and the government did listen to that, and I'm appreciative of that. To put that in context, when we started in 2008, up until 2013, we had an average of about 32 files that we were carrying per year. From 2017 to 2020, that average went up to 73 files a year. So the increase in investigators allows for the investigators to be deployed in a proper fashion where they can accumulate facts properly without being exhausted and give the files the attention they need. The result of that increase in files was simply that we were taking on more investigations than we could process at the civilian legal counsel level. So we have a backlog, and it's a significant one. With the additional funding, though, I'm quite confident that we can turn the tide in terms of actually clearing more files than we take on in a given year. Now, so much, of course, is dependent upon what happens out in the public realm and how many files we're asked to investigate. But if the averages stay the same, ASIRT is in a much better position going forward. But I stress it will take some time, of course, in terms of dealing with that backlog that's been accumulated over the last few years. In saying that, and I note that's not lost on anyone at ASIRT, that the public deserves answers. The families of affected persons deserve answers. Affected people who are not deceased deserve answers. And of course, officers deserve answers as well. And so we're endeavoring to deal with that backlog as fast as we can. That's my brief overview of where ASIRT sits. But of course, I welcome any and all questions regarding the functioning of ASIRT. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation and the detailed presentation from Commission as from ASIRT representatives as well. So we'll go to questions from council members. If you just raise your hands, and I'll keep track of the list. Councillor Stevenson.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much to our guests, both in person and virtually. You know, I just want to jump right into questions. Mr. Ewanson, I really appreciate you being here today, and very happy to hear that there has been a budget increase for your organization to help deal with that backlog. I did have a few questions that I wanted to follow up with you on. So, as you know, there were some recent officer-involved shootings in Edmonton, and I know that there's interest in the community to have the names of the victims in those cases released publicly. Just wondering what the process is for us to pursue that, and what your organization may consider in making that determination.
Thank you for the question, and I am certainly more than welcome to it. We're very happy to be here. We take the same position as actually every other civilian oversight organization in Canada does, and that is that we do not automatically release the names of deceased people. It's not a hard no, so there may be occasions during investigations where we have to release the name to assist in the investigation, to assist in the evidence collection. But what we're also very mindful of is that, put it in pure context, we're dealing with a situation where a family may be informed in the middle of the night that they've lost a loved one. And they're going through that grieving process, which of course ASIRT's involved in terms of providing next of kin notification. If we then release the name of that deceased person, we found that oftentimes that adds to the grief that a family may be suffering from. So we need to be very careful of that. There will be occasions where we will release a name if, for whatever reason, we believe that it will assist in the public's understanding of the investigation or the determination. So it's not a hard no in terms of the release of the names. But as well, we do not in any way, and cannot in any way, infringe upon the family's desire to release a name. So certainly, a family is right away communicated to by us. We sit down with them and advise them of the process. We keep that communication going on through the duration of a file. So they're well aware of what's occurring, and if they wish to speak to the media, certainly we in no way could prohibit that, nor do we in any way interfere with that. And so a family of deceased person is always free to reach out and make that known, and some have in the past, but ASIRT often will not embark upon that.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I'm hearing that it's really initiated by the family rather than any other parties. Yes, okay. Well, and just, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, of course, they're always free. You should always feel free to speak to the media and to comment upon the ASIRT process, whether positively or negatively. So we in no way discourage them from speaking to the media or making that information known. We just find that really it's their information in the sense that they've lost a loved one. And so I think it's much more appropriate in terms of their grieving process to allow them to make those decisions.
Great. Great, and just on that note, really interested to know that ASIRT does publish all of their investigative reports on their website. Just wondering if sort of all details are included in terms of names of individuals involved, and just maybe some insights about the pros and cons or challenges that your organization has faced. Sorry, we're getting some feedback.
Yes, sir.
So firstly, in terms of the investigative reports that we provide them in situations where officers have been cleared, and we use acronyms. So you'll see SO for subject officer and AP for affected person, as well as witnesses. And so there is not a naming procedure within the reports. So we do adhere to some privacy aspects in that. Then in terms of, I guess, challenges going forward, if I understood the second part of the question, really it's mandated to do two things. I want to put the budget increase to good use to properly staff ASIRT to get the answers out, because really what it comes down to is the belief in ASIRT that we can contribute to the public's confidence in policing is tied to, at least partly, to getting these answers out in a more expeditious fashion. When the answers take 2 to 3 years to come out, the public may lose trust in us. And so I definitely want to speed up that procedure. Of course, no investigation is the same, so some will take longer than others.
Great, thank you so much, and thanks again for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll go to Councillor Jans next.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, are we to ask questions of ASIRT or the Commission
Or
or both?
Commission or ASIRT, both.
Okay. Just building off Councillor Stevenson's line of questioning there, groups such as the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, law professors, victims' rights advocacy organization, the Media Coalition, and others have been urging for policy changes around the releasing of names. I believe the Edmonton Police Service current policy is they would release the names following an autopsy, providing that the deceased name does not compromise an investigation, identities confirmed, and the next of kin have been notified wherever possible. So I think it's important to remember that a crime, especially a homicide, is not just a crime against an individual or a family, but it's a crime against the whole community and the whole idea of the public safety. And I guess I'm wondering, what would it take for ASIRT to take a more transparent policy direction, or is there not willingness to do so, and the member feels it should be incumbent upon local commissions to do so? Like, would ASIRT ever direct a commission or not to release names? I'm just trying to figure out where there may be some willingness here.
If I understand, I might be misunderstanding the question or the background to it, but ASIRT wouldn't direct the commission to do one thing or the other. It's really just what ASIRT does in terms of our own media releases and our own reports. This was examined back in 2015, where there's a joint statement by this all civilian-led organizations in Alberta in terms of our naming protocols. And so, we intend to adhere to that. Regarding the language, I think it's important to note that not all homicides are criminal, and so we investigate homicides, which is the death by one person by another. But ultimately, if that becomes a crime, so if ASIRT were hypothetically to come to a determination that an officer had fired the gun in a criminal fashion and that resulted in a criminal charge, then that, of course, would be prosecuted by the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service. in a public forum where the name would come up on the docket, the person would be charged in an indictment. All of that would become public as part of that procedure.
Right, so what I hear you saying is ASIRT would not release the name, but I'm thinking of the instance where we had a bystander killed in Edmonton on February 24th, alone in their apartment. ASIRT would not release the name, but there's nothing precluding the Edmonton Police Commission or the Edmonton Police Service from releasing that name.
We don't bind anybody else. So it's just in terms of the function of ASIRT and our investigations.
Interesting. Okay, maybe we'll come back to that then, because I believe the police had said in the news that they were not able to release it because of ASIRT.
Well, the police have a very good understanding. We work very collaborative with the police in terms of release of information. And what must be most important throughout this is a proper investigation. And so we have had opportunities in the past or situations in the past where a name gets released and all of a sudden we find people are not willing to cooperate. So when the investigation is being conducted by ASIRT, we've had excellent cooperation by all police forces and simply standing back and saying, no, we're not going to release this information. We're going to let ASIRT do its job, which gets back to the public confidence aspect of it. But there's nothing in law where ASIRT could say, oh, don't do this or do this. We're an independent organization looking after ourselves in terms of proper investigations. I think it's just simply good practice that we'll speak with other police forces. And if we're conducting that investigation, the last thing that EPS or CPS or the RCMP would want to do is to be viewed in the public as doing something that might interfere with an ASIRT investigation. So I think that's the better way to look at it.
Thank you. And sorry, if I can just clarify, I think I missed, the audio crackled a little bit for me. Did you mention that you would have, with the new investigators you've hired, do you have a metric or a timeline on when, are you aiming for like a 30-day target of investigation from it landing on your desk out, or what is a more realistic timeline? I think we all agree 2 years is too far, but yeah, do you have thoughts on that?
So thank you, Councillor Jans. I totally agree with you. 2 to 3 years is not appropriate. It's a situation where these files kept landing on ASIRT's desk and we need to get through them. I can tell you that in Ontario, their organization, which is very similar to ASIRT, had a 4 to 5 month turnaround on a recent officer-involved shooting. And that was both for the investigation and then the conclusion. What we're dealing with now, though, is that we have families waiting on files that are from 2019 or 2020. And so with new files coming in on my desk, yes, we could process that quite quickly, but that's doing a bit of a disservice, if you would, to previous families who are waiting for their answers. And so we're really getting through that backlog. I can tell you that with the funding that we have now, if we were starting fresh and investigations were coming in, I'd be looking at a 4 to 6 month turnaround in terms of full investigation and a conclusion, bearing in mind that all investigations are different. But right now, we have all hands on deck in terms of dealing with the backlog that we're facing as well.
Thank you very much.
Any questions to Commission?
I do, but
Go ahead.
I
Well, 1 more minute, go ahead.
1 more minute, okay. But my question for the commission is, communications have been a very hot topic lately in the media and in general, and I was thinking about how at AHS, the minister speaks for Alberta Health. We don't often hear Verna Yu, less now, but we don't often hear Verna Yu speaking, or at the school system, you hear the board chair speaking, but not often the superintendent. What is the vision for the transparency and the, I would say, the communication strategy going forward for the commission, given some of the concerns or incidents over the past year?
Thanks, Councillor, for the question. Historically, the Commission has not been very public. You're correct. I think a lot of the citizens of Edmonton don't understand who we are or know exactly who we are and what we do. Certainly, recent events have allowed us an opportunity to show how vested we are in the city in ensuring that transparency is there and that accountability is there. I don't want the perception that council runs the police and police responds to the council. That's not the way it is. That's why the council is here, to provide that role. And collectively, we have decided that we need to make ourselves more public, and we need to be able to have venues like this where we can speak and say, we are holding the police accountable. We expect change in the service. We expect changes that will help change the things that are going on in the city, the community safety, well-being, the dangers, the risks. We don't want that to be seen as a single entity approach. We want that to be a collaborative approach that council, commission, and the service work together to.
Thank you so much, Councillor Jans. I would like to briefly pause our meeting this morning to recognize the National Day of Mourning at 11 o'clock. Today we pause and pray, today we pause and pay our respects to the men and women who have lost their lives, been injured, or are facing illness as a result of their jobs or a work-related incident. This year we are still in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic. And while we are slowly returning to a state of normalcy each day, workers are still putting their health and risk to keep the rest of us safe. No matter what profession people hold, each and every one of them deserve to arrive at their jobs knowing they will make it home. Unfortunately, this is always the case. Last year, 178 people lost their lives due to workplace tragedies, and each loss is felt deeply throughout their communities and families. To honor these people, I will ask that we take a moment of silence and reflect on committing ourselves to making workplaces safer for all of us. We'll do it 30 seconds. Thank you, everyone. I'll go to Councillor Cartmel.
Thank you, Mayor Sohi, and thank you, Chair McDougall, to you and your colleagues for sharing this time with us today. Really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I just want to pick up a couple of things that you mentioned in your presentation, John. And that first of those was that point of emphasis for the Commission. One of them is an emphasis on community-based policing. And I take that to mean, and my understanding of that is, more foot patrols, more presence in the community, more interaction between sworn officers and civilians, perhaps more eyes and ears and feet on the ground from the service in our community. I know in my office we're hearing a lot from those I represent, concerns around disorderly conduct, crime, other activity that leads to distress and leads to a loss of a sense of safety and security in Chinatown, in our downtown, and on our transit system, particularly in our LRT stations. And I know that we've had a lot of conversation around our table that there are those that are members of our most vulnerable populations, and we don't have an ethic at City Council around persecuting and prosecuting people that have a mental health challenge or an addictions challenge. But at the same time, we've heard from the Chief in the past that there is not just those from the vulnerable community, but there are active criminal activities, active criminals in those spaces. So my question is, has the Commission had a conversation with the service around increased police presence so as to dissuade those that are engaging in criminal activity in those places from engaging in those activities and perhaps bring back a sense of safety and security and belonging potentially on our transit system, most recently, but also in our downtown and in our Chinatown communities?
Thank you very much, Councillor Cartman. I appreciate the question. I think we all know that especially in the last couple of years, whether it's from COVID, whether it's from economic distress, the crime rates are going up. The crime severity is going up. If you look at over the last 3 years, the crime stats are dropping. However, that doesn't make things safe. Out and out. There are employees or employers that are escorting their staff to transit. There are people that are marginalized, that need that transit to get to their job, and they're not feeling safe. The question is, how do we change that? I understand this afternoon, City Council is releasing a statement on transit policy, so we'll wait and see how that plays out and what part the Commission and the service can have in helping to make transit safer. The city and the service have always worked together on trying to find these solutions. I think everybody can appreciate that it's not just crime that's the problem. We have the marginalized communities, we have the homelessness, we have the mental health issues, and we have the addictions issues. It's a multi-legged stool. All elements of those need to be addressed in order to make safety happen downtown. The Commission and the service are committed to helping that change, but we cannot do it alone. We need to have other agencies available so that there is not a sole source responder to all the problems in the city. Right now, after 4 o'clock, we have a sole source response, and that resource is stretched thin. And I also want to make sure that people realize that crime is not just related to Chinatown, to downtown. The focus seems to be on those areas, but there are other parts of the city that suffer from crime as well. And we want to make sure that we're not excluding those parts of the city as well. So I'll be interested to see this released today and see what City Council, the Commission, and the service can do together to help make downtown and the transit safer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cartmel. Councillor Price, can you click? Now this e-scribe is working, so I'll follow that list if you don't mind. I know you, Councillor Rice had her hand up earlier on before we start clicking in. So I'll go to Councillor Rice, then I'll follow the list on the deck. So Councillor Rice, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you all to be here and online in person and provide the reports. I do emphasize the question and come from the community-based policing. And so I understand, and from my office and from what I heard, the community safety is a big issue. So community safety is not only in downtown, and that also in the regular community and neighborhoods. And so the criminal behaviors or incidents happened more and more. That is what I heard and from my constituents. And also, and if you look at it from business perspective, for example, Chinatown business area. So that area could in 24 hours or 48 hours, like how many broken on the business windows. And so this type of things I think need addressed. And then this is really impact our cities, our citizens, our Edmontonians, and how they feel to take public transit, and how they feel even walk in the community. And then for the business, how they feel they can have normal business operation and to support our city's economy, recovery, and growth, and business development. So I really like the reports you mentioned, the few change here. So I get very excited to see the change, and thank you very much for the work. And then specifically, and then can you tell me a little bit more about the structure or the plan and on the emphasis on community-based policing?
The Police Commission and the Police Service are working together on the strategic plan and strategic goals for the next 2 years. We're looking at how we can continue to do good work that the service does while trying to move money around within the service to ensure that the same level or better levels of safety and security are provided. We had the opportunity to hear from the Chinese business community, and it was gut-wrenching to hear that they're at the point where they have to stop replacing glass in their windows and put up plywood because it's a never-ending chase the broken glass circle. And that's not how businesses thrive. That's not how people earn a living. So the service and the commission are committed to finding innovative ways to fix that. You can't police yourself out of social issues. there's a fine balance to be had between officer presence in these areas as well. A lot of the people that are in these communities feel marginalized, and some feel threatened by the service. So while there's a lot to be gained by having a police presence, we have to make sure that that's also balanced, that we're not pushing people out of that community who don't feel safe around the service. And it's important that we build those relationships so those that need the service of the police aren't afraid to call them, and they're not afraid when the service shows up.
Specifically in the neighborhood, and then I heard some my constituents talk about some houses have become the target and for the criminal behaviors. And so they called police, and it happened over and over for like this type of incidents. And then, so I heard, yes, increase and police presence in the neighborhoods. That is one option. Is there any other type of the solution, and we are exploring, and we can ensure our people living in the neighborhood and feel safe, and to have that even basic safety sense and have that better quality of life?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to single out certain neighborhoods, but I had the privilege of walking through a neighborhood that's going through exactly what you spoke about. There are buildings that have been burnt down for years that are still standing. There are unsafe houses that are still standing. Those are not policing issues. Those are issues that need a good, strong set of teeth in a bylaw that says, after X amount of time, a building that is burnt down needs to be tore down. A building that has been abandoned and is dangerous needs to be tore down. This is where we really rely on City Council to help the service have a better ability to control crime rates in these communities, because there isn't enough oomph in the bills and in the bylaws to tear down these places that become a haven for criminal activity. And if there's a way to make that happen, that's the relationships I'm talking about, where City Council can work with the service and help rid the communities of these homes that become dens of crime.
Thank you,
Okay,
Councillor.
thank you for that.
Thank you,
If
Councillor
I
Rice.
may I also add to that, Councillor Rice? Some of the innovative approaches that the service is putting forward is the PAC team, as well as the HELP team and the incubator in the City of Edmonton. And it's the first of a police service in Canada to start to look at ways in which we can support Edmontonians dealing with vulnerability, marginalization, homelessness, addictions. And so it's our community partners that are going to be the exceptional ways in which we respond to community safety and well-being differently. And it's exciting to watch the service transform policing to what you were asking around, how do we create safe spaces? And it's through the transformation of the service, and the Commission has been incredibly supportive of this transformation. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright, are you there? I'll go to Councillor Tang next, and then I'll wait for Councillor Wright to click again. Councillor Tang?
I think she just left. She'll probably join again.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for your presentation. I want to, appreciate so many of the commissioners showing up in person. And sorry I can't be there in person. I know this conversation is really needed face to face, but appreciate the opportunity nonetheless. I have several areas of. I have 3 areas of questions I wanted to just touch on. I think since the new year, and it's been pretty widely reported, we've seen higher than average police-led shooting and fatality compared to past years for the same time period. I guess I'm wondering if the commission chair can speak to some of the factors that are contributing to this, and what measures is the commission taking to address this with the service? And then for Mr. Ewenson, I'm curious if ASIRT has started any of the investigation, and if you have any commentary on this trend that we're seeing.
Thank you very much, Councillor. First of all, the Police Commission extends its sympathies to the families that have been affected by the recent shootings. I think it's also important to remember we're early into the year yet. We're barely through our first quarter, and I think this is an anomalous blip in shootings in the city. I'm not saying that to minimize the shootings, nor am I trying to say that we need to not focus on them. What's important is these are being investigated. They are sitting with ASIRT as we speak. And as I'm sure you can appreciate, if the investigation is with ASIRT, we are unable to comment on the ongoing investigation.
Yeah, and I'm not asking you to comment on specific incidents. I'm just asking you to comment on some of the, I guess, factors that could potentially be overarchingly contributing to this. For example, issues around mental health, around any phenomena around black market gun supply, for example, just to shed some insights on why the blip is happening.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, from the investigation perspective, once ASIRT's done, then the commission can have a look at it and discuss with the service if we need to do things differently. From a process, what is the service doing? I think we start to wade into a little bit of the operational side of the service, and the commission is here to provide governance and oversight, and we don't really get to get our hands into the operational aspect of
Right.
what the service's plans are.
Okay. No, I was actually asking what is the commission doing? But if you want to comment after the investigation is over, happy to have a conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of our exercise in doing our strategic plan is coming up with, as I said earlier, innovative ways to combat these crimes. I mean, we're not the only city that's suffering from increase in gun crimes. And I don't know, I'm not a strategist, I'm not an officer, I'm not sure if it's because of issues at the border over COVID, if people are just so fed up with everything that mental health matters get accentuated. But I can assure you, both the service and the commission are acutely aware of the number of guns that are on the streets, the ridiculous number of guns that the service is taking off of the streets, and the ongoing gun crime.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and certainly, some of the communities in my ward is keenly feeling that with some of the recent incidents. Mr. Yunsen, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor Tang. Before I get to that, I just wanted to backtrack. So I owe Councillor Jans an apology and a clarification regarding an answer. There is actually a memorandum of understanding with ASIRT and all police agencies in Alberta, whereby when we're involved in an investigation, there'll be no release of information without the knowledge and consent of ASIRT. And so in practice, it's a very collaborative and cooperative approach, because we do realize that news release does need to go out. So that is talked through. But ultimately, the responsibility does rest with ASIRT. So I didn't want to pass the buck on that one and provide you with that clarification. So my apologies. Councillor Tang, go back to the Commission's comments. It's not to in any way detract from what the families are going through in the situation, but I think we need to sort of see where our numbers are at over a defined period of time. And all these happened in terms of police shootings in fairly rapid succession in the calendar. So right now, of course, the investigations have started. In fact, we're called out within an hour or two of these incidents occurring. So the Edmonton Police Service notifies the Director of Law Enforcement, who then phones me regardless of the hour of the night. And then I deploy a team right away to begin that investigation. So we are well into all of those investigations as we speak.
Great, thank you so much for that. My other question for the Commission is that, I want to commend you on being proactive and taking initiative on the public engagement around the police funding and formula discussion. So I'm just curious how that's going. What has the public interest been so far, and any preliminary highlights?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Are you speaking about the Commission's engagement with Pametawa for community engagement in the budget process?
That's right.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, we're very fortunate to be able to engage Pametawa as not only as a Indigenous entity, but they have a rich history of working with people that are not traditionally reached during surveys and input. They have established and maintained a really good relationship with marginalized communities, the homeless, people who are probably the most affected by policing, but are the least engaged in the process. So admittedly, we had a bit of a low turnout initially. I'm not sure if that was due to COVID or survey fatigue, I'm not sure. But the research is not finished yet. We haven't received any packages back from them. We're excited to hear some of those responses, all of those responses. And then I think that will help guide our decision-making, because as much as we're read into what the service does and acutely aware of what the service does, unless we hear from those who are most affected by policing, we're not going to be able to make the decisions that make a difference and ensure that community safety and well-being continues in the city.
Yes, absolutely. And can you just
Thank
remind
you,
me your
Councillor
timeline
Tang.
for, oh,
That's it. I'm just trying to
okay, I
keep a
do have one
mental
more.
clock here.
I'll come back.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Councillor Wright, are you back? Okay, I'll go to Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Rutherford?
Yes, thank you. First, just from your presentation, you talked about sort of specialized officers or some sort of, I'm just trying to find my notes here. I wasn't expecting to be right next. Yeah, special constables, and then the tiered policing service. Can you explain more what that would look like and why that's sort of an ideal situation for the commission?
If you can bear with me for 1 second, I certainly can.
We don't have a question on that one, but I can take it if you want.
Sure. I'll let our executive director give you a reply to that, if you don't mind, please.
That would be great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So it's a request from the police service. So right now, if you want to go in to become an investigator in an accounting part of the service, or an IT investigator to lay charges or things, you have to, at this point, enter in as a constable, go through the recruitment process, and work your way over to the unit. Giving the ability of the police service to appoint special constables directly allows the police service to reach into IT firms or accounting firms, hire the talent they need to do the job without going through the service. So it's a way of bringing in specialized skill sets without the necessary transition from front-level constable into a plainclothes unit.
If I may add to that, so what that would look like on the ground, particularly, let's say, around cryptocurrency fraud, the service would then be able to have an officer who, like my colleague explained, around accounting, IT technology, so that that personnel can address those issues as opposed to doing tickets for speeding, so that we have personnel that can specifically target crimes that are technologically based, as well as crypto-based. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. And you mentioned in the presentation as well, because I think that the biggest thing that we're going to come to head on this year is around police funding for the next 4 years. And it mentioned that the Police Commission can provide anything to council that will help with that budget-making decision. So I guess my question is, at this point, what is the commission planning to provide to council in terms of information to help us with that budgeting decision?
The commission is welcome to present anything that council would like. If the council puts an ask before the commission, we would be happy to provide that information that would allow council to make decisions on budgeting. I think the upcoming engagements that we have with City Council will allow an array of questions to be asked, and those questions may be what generate an ask from Council for information.
Okay, and then my last question is, again, I want to say that I had the privilege of going out and doing a walkabout with EPS in January. I've also been randomly going around and taking different transit routes to see if there's been an improvement in transit safety. So unlike my colleague, I actually think that our transit safety has improved over the last couple of months, and especially I've seen a marked difference in the last couple of weeks with transit safety. So as somebody that is an active transit user, I'd like to highlight that. But I guess what I'm what I heard in your presentation is that you encourage that switch to sort of more of those services and that, multiple pronged approach and whatnot, but still continuing to fund. At what point, in commission's perspective, is that money best dealt with outside of the police service?
I think that's a brilliant question. I think that's probably a question on a lot of people's minds. The more money that can be put into the social network to affect those changes, the better. If money were to be taken from the police service and put into an established entity that is there for that safety net, I don't think there would be much discussion around that. The problem is right now what exists. After 4 o'clock in the afternoon, who do you call? I can assure you that the officers take no joy in responding to mental health calls. They know that they're the only ones that can go. But who else is there? Until an entity is established, the service is still mandated to respond to those calls. And taking money away for the sake of taking money away accomplishes nothing. If you're going to take money away and put it in the air somewhere, that's probably a difficult decision to make. If you take money from the police service to an established entity that will alleviate the weight on the service and do that public service piece of looking after the mental health calls, looking after the marginalized, looking after addictions, a safe spot for people who have been kicked out of shelters. Where do they go? If they have been kicked out of every shelter, what is the next step? Do the police put them in jail? That does not sound like the best mental health or recovery solution for somebody who is already mired in the legal system.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you for those answers, and I agree. It's not an either or, it's a both and, right? And that's I think the discussion that we have to frame this around, so that it's not adversarial.
Can I add a little bit to just what John was talking about? No, sorry.
Sure, yes, please do.
All right, I think what's clear is the lack of transparency around.
Can you move close to the mic if you don't mind?
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Is this better?
Yeah.
All right, so I think what is an issue and what is clear is that there is a lack of transparency for you as council to make decisions about budget, because us as a commission has not held the service accountable for what they are currently doing. So the argument around don't take money away because we're doing all this work is not coming true, because we as a commission are not bringing you information to say these are the milestones and these are the things that the police is doing. So I say this to say that we as a commission are incumbent to do that work and to bring you transparent information around policing and what current funding is being used for, before you can say, you're doing all this work with this money, here's how we'll direct. This is what's lacking, and this is how we'll direct the rest of the funds, because you are lacking in that area. So it is our commitment to do that work. And I, as an accountant, know the issues around budget, and the issues around budget being taken away are highlighted in times where it seems like you're not getting enough information. So we own that.
That's okay. That's great, and I will think about what I could ask for, and I'm heartened to hear that. And I'm also wanted to say I'm heartened to hear, that acknowledgement that while, more police presence is sometimes welcome, it's also can be traumatizing and triggering for some folks. So I'm glad to see that recognition from the commission, and it's a tough job that you're doing, and so thank you for everybody that has stepped up into this role as community members. It's probably one of the toughest jobs as community members that you've been tasked with the ones we appoint to anyway. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Salvador, sorry, Councillor Wright wasn't there? Okay, Councillor Salvador.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And thank you so much to everyone for being with us today. I just have a few questions. So I guess I'll go to Chair McDougall first. I just wanted to loop back around the comments you made related to problem properties, some of the vacant and derelict buildings in our city, and especially in some of the neighborhoods that I represent. And I guess just the importance of, doing what we can as a council to take stronger action and really to use all the tools that we have in our toolbox to address that issue, which we are doing, absolutely. My understanding is that, fires are also being deliberately set at occupied homes, not necessarily problem properties. So my question is, during ongoing sort of long-standing investigations, how does the commission help maintain public trust that the service is in fact sort of taking action to prevent ongoing incidents when communication is typically quite minimal and incidents are continuing in the neighborhood?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Firstly, I'm sure everybody understands that if it's an ongoing investigation, neither the service nor the commission can comment on that. However, the service can identify these problem properties, and you don't even need the service to identify these. The community councils, the community members are the ones that will identify what these problems are. And then once their investigations are done, they can share that information. However, I think it's important to remember that the commission is the people to go to. If you have complaints about service, complaints about investigations, questions about investigations, question about what the police service is or is not doing, that's why we are here as a commission. We are the people that can provide the answers to the citizens.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think, that's potentially a gap right now, is just helping Edmontonians know that that's an option for them, and that the commission does play that role in our city. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to follow up on some questions related to safety on public transit as well. And again, the role of the commission in kind of safeguarding public trust as it relates to those ongoing issues. So I understand that there's sort of a necessary separation and that operations are in the scope of EPS, not the commission. But I guess what conversations have been had with the service around this so far? And I understand conversations are ongoing, but as a city and as a council, we are trying to take those steps to address safety on transit. And I guess what role does the commission play in ensuring that this issue is a clear priority for the service? So I'm looking at the distinction between directing operations versus making clear our collective and evolving priorities around community safety and well-being.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I mean, I can't stress enough how important transit is to the citizens of the city, and safe transit especially. As I said before, the commission and the service have been working with City Council to find avenues to increase that safety and ensure that people can have safe and unfettered access to transit. Again, I'm waiting to see the release this afternoon from City Council to see how that will play into a more meaningful, helpful engagement between the commission and the service to make transit safer.
Okay, so when I'm thinking about sort of how those types of priorities are communicated from commission to service, is that just kind of an ongoing dialogue, or are there specific, mechanisms for that communication and translation to happen?
There's always ongoing discussions on what we can do to make things safer. Transit is certainly very high on our list. We've had a couple of options we presented to previous councils, and we look at finding more innovative ways to work collectively with what we already have for resources from the city and what we have for resources from the service to work together to find a mechanism that will work, whether that will manifest as a new type of a beach program, whether it'll be a hybrid blend. We are in discussions. We don't have a firm final outcome yet. We're waiting on a variety of things, including the release this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further to that, Councillor Salvador, the commission is also very aware that it's not transit that's the issue. It's homelessness, mental health, and addiction. And the commission is always continuously asking our service what it is they're doing. We are continuously talking about the PAC team, the health team, because we want to see solutions. How is it going with the partnerships? And we recognize that the LRT issues that people face are weighing heavily on all Edmontonians in that it's going to take an agreement and a partnership between the service, the city, and the commission to help turn things around, that it is the homelessness, the addictions, and the mental health issues that are fundamentally the problem in the LRT. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salvador. Councillor Knack?
Sorry, I think, am I in?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go, sorry. Appreciate all of well, first the presentation earlier today and all of the answers to many of the questions. I only have a few items left, and this is going to be a little bit completely different topic. One question I get a lot, I find it at community meetings, different things like that, relates to how we accept reporting. And if we've looked at different models or approaches to more easily accept reporting of crime to then inform where we're patrolling. So I'll give a good example. I think many folks know, at least I find it in the West End here, is that, you know, folks will often take those non-serious incidents, maybe an attempted crime, but not a crime in progress, and they'll post it on the community Facebook page or the Nextdoor app, and then they don't post it on, they don't actually call EPS to report that. I'm wondering if there's been any conversation amongst the commission, amongst EPS, around how we might be able to better collect those, call it the near misses, like we have in traffic safety, but for crime, to help inform the work that's happening.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I find it really interesting, that neighbor app and Facebook community pages, they have a trove of information, everything from doorbell camera video to photographs. And I'm heartened to see the communities come together and have sort of a virtual neighborhood watch program. But again, if they're failing to reach out, I think that becomes an education piece from the commission. We're responsible to the public, and we may need to up our game in communication to say, hey, if you are having crime in your community and you're not reporting it to the service, here's some avenues to do that, whether it's the non-emergent number, or if you feel that it's of a severity that requires an urgent call, 911. We need to find a way to make sure that the community has the ability to feel safe and an ability to not just report their crimes, but report the crime and be heard and seen and understood and have some feedback from the service on those crimes.
Mm-hmm. I guess I want to turn the question around of do we need to adapt though? So, you know, and I'll give this again, I'll give that example. Somebody has a doorbell camera footage from 2 o'clock in the morning of somebody going trying handles. Calling the non-emergency line to actually report so again, there hasn't been an actual theft. So calling 911 probably doesn't make sense. Calling the non-emergency line to report something like that is, I mean, with the greatest respect, I think a very long and painful process for an individual who's busy with life. And so do we need to look at maybe us adapting to the new reality of the world that people are trying to report in different ways?
I think that's fair. There was a presentation done by a batch of new recruits, and one of them was on the ability to collect information from members of the community when a crime happens, and that's talking about the doorbell cameras or security cameras that they have. And this officer came out with a door hanger that says, EPS was here, there was a crime this date, this time. Please check your video footage to see if you have anything with the officer's name, phone number, and file number. My question to them was, why can't they just upload that video to an EPS website? And the answer I received from the service was they do not have the technology nor the server space or the IT capabilities for that to happen. It's not a matter of not wanting to do that. It's just not having the capacity to do that.
So then I guess, and I think I'm coming up on my 5 minutes, so I'll end with this and maybe come back on. Well, we'll probably be out of time. You know, we over the last 2 capital budget cycles, I think, have done some fairly massive investments into EPS, including on the IT side, if I recall. So what do we need to do to make sure we have this sort of modern day technology so that folks can take that content, make sure it's getting into the hands of those who are trying to monitor what's happening and using that data to help them determine where they're going to be deployed. So what do we need to do in IT, you know, review? Do we need to, is there some type of report that's going to come forward to the commission that will allow us to better understand what upgrades need to be done to modernize our reporting structure?
It's almost like you're reading my mind, Councillor Knack. The commission is in the process of standing up an IT committee. And for that very reason, if we are not IT savvy in this day and age, I think we're missing out on a lot of great opportunities. The IT committee or the IT community at EPS is very well switched on. They know what they want to do. It's just how can we do this? How do we update everything to get this? How do we build capacity to bring these on? So I'm optimistic with us standing up an IT committee that we can realize better ideas and outcomes by having these discussions with the IT community of the service.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Councillor Principe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I would like to thank all of you so much, not only for the presentation, but all that you do for us in Edmonton. Thank you very much. And I would like to say that I do agree with your statement about dealing with the problem properties. My concern is that, are we just displacing the criminal activity? And do we need maybe better enforcement?
Thanks, Councillor. And I think that those are brilliant questions. It goes back to what I said earlier about the multi-leg stool. Nobody wants to just have a shovel and move crime from one community to the next. That doesn't serve the population well, and that's not a true reflection of what EPS wants to do either. And this comes back to, what do we have for that social network? What's our catch basin for these people? Because absolutely, if we can get rid of the areas that are allowing crime to flourish, where do those people go? And who are those people? Are they genuinely bad people that we want to lock up? Are they people that have mental health issues who we want to get into a facility to help them manage that? Or are they people with addictions who are doing what they do to feed their habit? And what can we do to manage that? How can we get them to a place that will help manage their addictions, therefore lowering crime in those communities? I was blown away when I said, where are people's new garbage bins that the city rolls out? Where are they? If they're not chained up in the backyard, thieves use them to move stolen goods. So a lot of people in the communities are missing their bins because the crime rate in that area is so rampant, they're using these things to fence all their material. So again, it's that multi-pronged approach. If enforcement is not the answer to every problem, it's what's underpinning that problem. And what can we collectively, I'm not saying it's not the police problem. What I'm saying is the police need to be part of the solution, but they can't be the sole source for that solution.
Further to that question, Councillor, I think, we know that they are overrepresented by Indigenous peoples, often the sites where there are camps or drug usage in abandoned houses. More often than not, we more recently read that through Homeward Trust report that of the youth, the homeless youth, 65% of them are Indigenous, and of that, 32 were women, so young women. And so when we think about our role as the commission and what the service is doing around abandoned places, crime scenes, we know that young women are not choosing to go to women's shelters or to addiction shelters because of their vulnerability and being exposed to sexual aggression, further violence. And so we saw earlier there was a tragic death of a woman in a garbage can because she didn't have a safe place to go. And so when we're talking about these abandoned houses, we're generally talking about First Nations people who don't have a home to go to, who are battling mental health and addictions, and who are definitely interconnected to the Indian residential school legacy. Which leads us to, again, the collective work that we need to do around homelessness, addictions, and mental health. We cannot house people without addressing the mental health and the addictions, and we cannot address addictions and mental health without giving people a safe place to live. And so when we go to those houses that are burnt or that are safe places other than a shelter, people are making their lives there. And so as leaders in this city, what are we doing collectively in partnership to lift people out of those deplorable situations? And that's our responsibility collective here today, is how do we make Edmonton a safe place for all citizens, including those who are living in burned houses and living on our streets and battling addictions and homelessness. So I think your question is very important, and I think it's up to all of us to bring solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some questions, but I know Councillor Jans has to leave to represent city at the day of mourning, so I'll go to you next, Councillor Jans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question again is for Mr. Ewenson. Could you clarify, would ASIRT release the name of the innocent person in the apartment who was shot through the window? Not the person, not the suspect under investigation. Would ASIRT release the name of the innocent person?
No, we won't be releasing the name at this time.
So how would that name be shared?
Well, it could be shared in a variety of reasons. If, and this is hypothetical because we still have a lot of decisions to make, but if there was a charge that ended up in the court process, that name could be released. The family members have been contacted. We have spoken with them. They may choose to release it. So that'd be a variety. And as well, if there's a Fatality Act inquiry, it may come out during that process. But no, we wouldn't be releasing it at this time.
But the person in the apartment was not a suspect in any incident. They are not in any way connected to this. It's a tragic happening. So why would ASIRT not release the name? They're not under investigation for homicide or anything else.
We don't see the utility of that, of putting the family in that position. I don't see how it's relevant in terms of the public's understanding. Clearly, based on the question, the understanding is already out there in terms of the role of that individual. And so I just don't see why it enhanced the public's understanding or the trust in policing by releasing the name of a victim in that situation.
So would ASIRT object to Edmonton Police Service releasing that name?
Yes.
Okay. My next question is for the commission. I really was heartened by a lot of the things I heard today, and one of the focuses of mayor and council has been around decriminalization and trying new tools for the drug poisoning epidemic. I'm disheartened to see some of the chief's remarks and the chief's approach commissioning yet another study when we have more than enough studies and more than enough evidence. I realize the chief wants to take a position. Would the commission consider taking their own position on decriminalization? I see in other areas that the commission has taken their own position in, say, media relations or who qualifies as a journalist compared to the chief. But in something as critical as drug policy, would the commission take a stance?
Thanks, Councillor. Combating the systemic racism remains a priority for the Commission. The police service was the first service to openly admit that there is systemic racism. We know there's a nationwide discussion going on about re-examining the drug laws, how to deal with this opioid crisis and the effects that it's having on so many of the vulnerable citizens of Canada. We point out the Commission is not the decision maker on health policy or the application of federal drug laws. Locally, the issue will be decided by Edmonton City Council and the provincial and federal governments after hearing from Edmontonians, community health groups, health experts, police law enforcement organizations, and any other group that they choose to consult with. We anticipate the decision makers take an approach that carefully considers input from community health experts as well as ensuring public safety needs are met.
Okay.
If I
I'll
may.
stop you here because I have 3 more people on the list.
Okay,
so
yeah,
we
thank you
need to
very
be done by 12.
Appreciate it. Let's do this
Thank you.
again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor John. So I want to get a sense on, John, on the investigation done by the commission on police misconduct. Are the conclusions public? And how much time does it take actually for an investigation to be concluded?
If you're okay, Mr. Mayor, I think our Public Complaints Director is on the
Sure,
call.
yeah, please,
and
yeah.
she's our legal for the commission. I'd
Yeah.
like to refer that question to her, please.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So can I, Mr. Mayor, may I just clarify the question?
So my question is that once the investigations are concluded in the misconduct of police officers, are those conclusions public? And also, how much time does it take on average for an investigation to conclude?
So when an investigation is being conducted by the Professional Standards Branch
Yeah.
into a public complaint, the results of that investigation is provided to the complainant. It is not made public, it's not made available to the public at large, but the complainant may choose to do with it what they wish. They're not, prevented from sharing that, generally speaking. And if that complainant is unsatisfied with the results that they have received, with the disposition of their complaints, they have the option of proceeding with an appeal to the Law Enforcement Review Board, as was discussed earlier. And any appeals to the Law Enforcement Review Board, those are generally publicly available. So when we're talking about investigations that are being sent to a disciplinary hearing for a police officer, if the investigation leads to the chief of police to determine that a disciplinary hearing is required, those hearings are almost always open to the public.
Okay.
And a list of upcoming hearings are available on the EPS website, and any member of the public can attend, except in very, very limited circumstances. They may be closed for privacy reasons. But yes, the general default position is that those are open to the public.
Okay, got it. John, question on the budget. Like city council give the budget, you allocate the budget to, that's your job as a commission. Understanding how much of the policing resources go toward social disorder, dealing with the mental health issues, houseless issues, and addictions crisis that we're facing. How much do you, how much power or how you exercise as a commission to say out of $400 million, we're going to put $50 million into tackling social issues still under the police service, or is that a decision made by the chief?
I'll give a short answer, and then if our resident money specialist would like to speak up, I'd allow that. I think it would be an excellent opportunity. It's important to realize how much of our budget goes to personnel. And it's that little tiny bit that we have left after that we have to manage. And through our strategic plan, that allows us to figure out where the money is best allocated. And that's done collectively. The police service brings us what their plan is. We sit and discuss it, and we say, this works, this doesn't work, without getting into the operational wing of it all. But I'd be happy to have Commissioner speak up as well, please.
All right, I'm going to get used to this. So yes, I think that a big part of that is tying the strategic plans to the actual outcomes of those plans. So I think us as a commission do not directly say you need to allocate this amount of money to this pot, but we certainly look at the strategic plan and make sure that it aligns with our goals as a commission. And if they do, it is our job as a commission to hold them accountable to those plans as well. So while not directing the money, we can direct the strategic plans and hold them accountable to the spending towards those goals.
Okay. Okay. So if vast majority of the money goes toward, that'll be my last question, personnel, and we continue on that path, right, hiring more police officers, that will continue to go to personnel, then there's very little left for social say agencies allocation, right? Am I getting sense of that?
Yeah, exactly, and those are some of the issues that we're tackling, is that what are we willing to give up in order to achieve some of the future goals of the EPS in terms of how they operate as a service, right? So yes, personnel is important, but how about these other social issues that we're dealing with, and how do we start allocating services towards the EPS of the future? And if the EPS of the future is it's to be more than putting officers on the ground, then we truly have to start allocating money to those goals.
Good. That's good. And now we're going to follow up on your idea of that social agency. Like if we're going to take money away from police, there's got to be an agency that actually manages that social investment into that's some of the missing components. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for everyone being here. So we have 3 more council members. We have 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes each. Councillor Principe, you have another question? Okay. Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kufor-Boachi, for your comments earlier around increasing the clarity of information in the budgeting process. I really appreciate your expertise on that. Just very briefly, wondering, reflecting on, budget is going to be huge this year. Just wondering if the Commission has plans to reflect on the resources for the Commission itself, recognizing that it's a $1.4 million budget, overseeing, a $400 million organization. So just any thoughts on that as the expectations on the organization grow?
So, yeah, thanks, Councillor. Our budget has increased in the last 5 years. I'm just trying to find my numbers here. It went from, I think it was 300,000. Thank you. Yeah, it went from 390,000 in 2000 to 1.2 million in 2021. There's been a greater need and a greater call for governance and oversight in police services recently, and that has dramatically increased our workload. We are at the point now where just to keep up with demands from public and from council, we need to bring another person on board to help us manage our load and to make sure that the workload we have is manageable and our staff aren't having mental health issues from being overburdened with work and long hours and the heavy asks. So we currently have 5 full-time staff, and we're looking at bringing another one on. And I'm optimistic, or we're optimistic, that will be enough to help manage our workload. We're also looking forward to having our new commissioners join us. It gives us more voice, and it gives us more votes, and it allows to have more representatives from the community have a voice on the commission.
Great, thank you so much. And just finally,
stop here.
Oh, was that 2 minutes?
Yes, one each. One question each.
I thought it was 2
minutes. Only got 3 minutes left. Sorry. Councillor Tang, minute and a half.
Okay, great. I have to go as well. And I guess just following up on that comment from the chair around, that representation piece. I'm cognizant and been following some of that relationship building work that the service has been doing with Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. I think it's excellent and needs to continue. I'm curious if the commission does much of the relationship building with communities as well, recognizing that, as you said, we have, the most diverse commission we've ever had in the history of Edmonton.
Thank you very much. When I first joined the commission, that was my goal, is to make the public more aware of who we are and what we do. We had sat and had quite a few talks about the best way to do this. We had a plan all lined up, and then COVID took us out of the game. We still have that in our back pocket. We are excited as restrictions and safety becomes a little bit more easy to manage, that we can get out and do these community engagement pieces. Whether it's commissioners going to councillors' picnics in the park, whether it's going to events and having something along the lines of coffee with a cop, or if it's a simple matter of having a handout that is transparent enough that on one side it tells the public what the commission does, and on the opposite side it tells the police service what the commission does. And that way, we're not hiding from the police what we do, and we're not hiding from the public what we do with the police. So there is an active engagement piece that's there. We're just waiting for the fence of COVID to be opened.
Thank you,
Yeah,
John.
Further
Further to that, we
Councillor Rice?
also, many of our commissioners sit on different community councils where we engage in regular meetings. For example, I sit on the Chief Community Council as a commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rice?
I know we're almost ending, and I'm last councillor. I really want to be quick, but at the end, and I really want to start to share what I heard and from my constituents. And so I just want you to know, and I want Commission know, I want EPS know, and what I heard, and the public trust for our police services is still in place. So, and I heard, and even like some like positive stories, they called 911, how care about that, and for our people's safety, for our Edmontonians' safety. I want you know, and EPS know that. And so my question is about our students' safety. And because recently, and specifically last night, I received an emergency phone call and from one of my constituents, and so I got home at 1:30 a.m. And then the student actually was experienced some very difficult time, and then in the school side. On the school side, and so the school called the police and let principal know, and however the student come home with shaking and then cannot go back to school anymore. And then for that way, I just ask, I understand the challenge and between the capacity and the resources you have and with the tangible services we provided, but what a capacity right now on school side to ensure our students and feel safe to go to school every day.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We spoke earlier about the school resource officer program, how it's been discontinued. There is a report that's pending through the service on school resource officers with some statistics that we're really anxious to see if this program is worth restarting. But it's also important to remember it's not the police that have the final say on whether a school resource officer program operates. It depends on the school board. There may be school board that says, you know what, we don't think that this process is what we want in our schools, and they have that right to say no. We can't force a program on a school board. I think there's some amazing outcomes that have happened, and I think there's probably a good space for them going forward, but the Commission is waiting excitedly to see this report so that we can help the service make a decision.
So I encourage the students and parents contact school trustee yesterday already. And then also, as a counselor, I do believe and then ensure our students' safety is so important. We cannot ignore that part.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. So that concludes all the questions. Thank you so much once again, everyone from Commission and John and Matt for working with my office and City Clerk to set up this meeting. This is a very good start of having an open public dialogue about issues that are important to Commission and to Council. And I am pretty sure that we will have many, many more conversations like this to strengthen that relationship. So on behalf of City Council, each and every one of you, thank you so much for being here today. And Councillor Stevenson?
Yes, thank you. I'll just move that we receive this report for information.
Okay, we need a seconder.
Second.
Second by Councillor Principe. All right, any questions for receiving for information? I see none. Please vote.
Madam Clerk, I'm in favor.
I think I'll have to vote verbally. Sorry, it's not popping up.
I'm yes.
But I guess I should actually say yes. Voting verbally and not saying what I'm going to do is not constructive.
We have all the votes.
Display the votes, please. That is carried, and We are adjourned.